according to Bashar, those introductions will happen within the next 5 years. Probably beings like Pleiadians, some of the hybrids will be among the first. A lot of the children now are almost literally a new species. Genetic alterations have happened that make them more open to the idea of telepathic contact, psychic functioning, other ETs and things like that. The Oversoul is that level of our greater consciousness that experiences a multitude of soul parallel reality experiences simultaneously. A moment of expanded lucidity creates experiences like deja vu, which can be the result of tapping into parallel realities or spirit level realities. Parallel realities is just the way things are structured in reality. This gets a little bit complex. I'll try to break it down simply. When one of them is standing right in front of you and you understand this person came from another planet, it's like having an energetic earthquake happen within you. What does that mean for our reality?
Welcome everybody to the Heart Coherence Collaborative. This is the best day ever because we have Darryl Anka with us in a very, very special Heart Coherence Collaborative episode. And the reason this is so special today is because we recently had Darryl on and it was phenomenal. And I was going through the comments of our last interview and we had like 100 different comments from people. And so I reached out to Darryl and I said, can we interview you again with all these questions from everybody? And you said yes. And so I reached out to your community and I said, hey, we're going to be doing this kind of community style interview. Does anybody have any questions for Darryl? And we have received thousands of questions. And so first off, we just want to say to the Bashar community, we love you. We're honored to do this and we're going to do multi-parts. So we've separated everything. We've compiled all the questions. And today we're going to take our first stab at the best questions from everybody in the group. So thank you, everybody. And thank you, Darryl.
You are welcome. Thank you for having me again. Happy to do this.
Awesome. You want to go first?
Yes. So the first question is, Bashar says that when we come to Earth, we choose a theme to explore. Is it possible to change that theme once we are here? And if so, how would you go about doing that?
If we have completed a particular theme and we decide to remain physical, then you can probably start a new theme. I think you would figure out when you have finished a theme what that's all about, because something else would come into your life synchronistically. Now, one could also say that maybe having a different subject or a change of focus could still be part of the original theme. So in general, we do choose our entry points and our exit points, and there may be a number of themes we're exploring on that life path from the beginning to whatever the end may be. So it's a little hard to tell whether you're actually changing your theme or whether the idea of having a different theme is part of the overall life path. But it's certainly possible to experience different focuses during a particular life path, whether that's an actual change of theme or the continuation of your overall theme. Little difficult to say.
Great. We received this question a lot. As we shift between parallel timelines, do we continue the relationships with people that we are close with?
If there's a need to, if there's an agreement to, yes. If there isn't, then no. I mean, it's that simple. We make agreements to experience connection with certain people that may be part of our soul family or someone that we need to interact with that can teach us lessons and we can teach them lessons to help each other grow. If that agreement has finished, then it may no longer be necessary to experience that person in your life, and they may drift away or something like that. But generally speaking, you're shifting all the time. So obviously, if you're constantly shifting billions of times a second, and the same people seem to still be there in the next moment, then obviously they remain for as long as you have an agreement to interact with them for whatever purposes serve either of you.
So I think the basic question is that as we're shifting into different Earths, parallel realities, you will still be able to interact with people that are on the other Earth. Is basically
For a while. For a while.
So
After a while, probably not. No. If the vibrations become too incompatible, too different, then you may no longer interact with the people that have decided to shift to a completely different version of Earth that is simply not relevant for the version that you're experiencing. So for a while, we can sort of still see all the different choices, all the different mixes. This is the time of choosing. So, but once you have decided which, so to speak, train to get on, then whatever direction that train is going ultimately is going to get farther and farther away from the other tracks that have left the train station. So ultimately, you'll only be on the train that you've chosen. Right now, we can still see and hop aboard all the other trains because they're still close enough as they have left the station. They're not that far apart yet, but eventually they may be too far apart.
I just want to add one more part to this because it's
Yeah.
fascinating. So should we actually start saying goodbye to our loved ones if it's clear that they're going to the other Earth? And I'm not saying, that I'm going to one or the other, but it's
Well,
this to
a
me.
little hard to tell.
Yeah.
That may be hard to tell because somebody can decide to change.
Mm.
And therefore, saying goodbye might be kind of irrelevant if they've decided to change and have a version of themselves in the reality that you've chosen. You don't necessarily know that that's a final goodbye. So I think you just have to trust the agreements and you can always connect again in spirit. So in that sense, there's never really ultimately a goodbye because especially if they are part of your soul family, you will meet them again.
Mm.
So I think you just have to let synchronicity be your guide as to what seems appropriate to say to someone. Because again, at any moment, they could change their mind and have a version of themselves in the same parallel reality version of Earth that you're in. So you never know.
Great answer.
Hmm. Given these turbulent times of information, misinformation, disinformation, and timeline splitting, it's understood that it's important to stay centered in one's heart. How does discernment work when you're centered in your heart?
Well, it's like the old saying of picking up on a vibe. When you're honest with yourself about what you believe to be true and you're clear about how you may be aligned or misaligned with the idea of positive or negative energy, then it's easier to discern what is vibrationally compatible with what you prefer in your life or not. So it's just like developing a muscle, it's developing a sense, but it takes clarity about yourself, honesty, transparency within yourself. And the more you do that, the easier your senses can pick up on what is either in alignment with what you prefer or either in alignment with either a positive or a negative energy. You just really have to be clear about what you're observing, why you're observing it. Just look at, I mean, it's an old saying, don't necessarily pay attention to what people say, look at what they do. It's the actions that tell you who people are, what they're all about. And by really observing what those actions are all about, then you can decide whether what their behavior is compatible with what you prefer in your life. If you're talking about the discernment of knowing whether a person or not should be somebody that you are interacting with.
Great. We've had a lot of people from your community ask specific questions about historical figures. I was wondering if Bashar has brought up any characters from history and said that they were of specific importance that would be worth mentioning.
I don't remember every conversation that Bashar has had, obviously, in channeling. I don't recall. I know that there have been moments when he's talked about different figures like Tesla and so on and so forth, and Einstein. I don't really know the extent to which he has discussed them. And a lot of times that could be happening in a private session. So he could have done that not publicly.
Hmm.
Uh, so that would have to be an actual question for Bashar rather than me, because I don't really know who he's talked about.
Okay, nice.
Um, People have talked a lot about making choices and there being some confusion about how to handle them. Specifically, how can you make choices from a neutral standpoint while still being obsessed with your highest excitement?
I'm not sure I would use the word obsession, but I mean, you're following your passion, you're making choices that are in alignment with that idea and being clear again within yourself about the difference between excitement and anxiety. So if you're making choices in any way, shape, or form more based on fear or anxiety, then that's something that someone really needs to look at within themselves to find out why they would be choosing things that really, if you pay attention, you know are out of alignment with who you really prefer to be. Because we always have a reason for choosing what we choose. And that reason is usually because on some level we have a belief that says that it is more beneficial than the alternative. But you have to really understand that that could only be because you believe the alternative will actually cause something worse to happen. That may not actually be true. So you really have to look at the factual nature or lack thereof of the choices that you're making in terms of what would really be out of alignment with who you are, what would really be worse if you chose it? Or is that just your fear speaking that, oh, yeah, it's going to be worse, so I'll stay where I am? Because a lot of times people are making choices they know are not what they prefer, but they keep choosing it because they believe the alternative would be worse. So it's a safer bet to stay where you are, as uncomfortable as it may seem. So it's all about why are you choosing what you're choosing and really deeply investigating the reasons that you're creating for why you choose what you choose and whether it is truly compatible with who you prefer to be or whether you're making choices out of anxiety. And that goes back to the idea of developing your ability to discern the difference between a positive or negative energy, between joy, love, or fear.
Mm.
Hmm. I have a follow-up question, which is, um, when we use our excitement to follow things and make choices, a lot of people have had, let's say, a childhood that's traumatic that set them up to be excited by the wrong things. Often in love, people are most excited about somebody who's, not great for them and will
Yeah.
destroy them, and finds people who would be good to them boring. So
Yeah.
how do we work all of that out?
Well, I mean, not to be too pragmatic about it, but some of that may require therapy.
Yeah.
Mm.
So, I mean, again, that's simply part of a process of getting to know yourself and understand why you are making the choices you are making. If you can make a choice that starts to reflect to you in some way, shape, or form based on the behavior of the person you've chosen to be with, that something is off kilter, that something is out of alignment, then again, you have to look at why are you staying in that relationship? Why are you making those choices? Again, you do understand that sometimes people who have been brought up in traumatic experiences, that's what they're equating to the idea of love because that's all they've been taught. That's all they know. But eventually, as you mature, you do, if you're in any way, shape, or form, focused on the idea of being kind to yourself and loving yourself, you do start to wonder why you're making those kinds of choices if they seem to be something that is still continuing that theme of abuse. Because then ultimately, if you keep choosing that, all you're doing is continuing to abuse yourself. You're just carrying on the legacy of what you have learned. So usually most people get to the point where they feel uncomfortable with what it is that's happening around them. And that discomfort should be one of the first clues that there's something within themselves to investigate. This doesn't excuse the people that are abusing them by any means, because it's their duty to stop being abusers. Because someone who is an abuser is probably someone who was abused, and they carry on that chain of events. Nevertheless, it's up to each and every individual to be self-empowered. And in a sense, barring the fact that you can attract someone to help you, to also be self-healing. So self-healing can be attracting someone who can really truly help you, guide you in a more positive direction. But it also means taking responsibility for the choices you're making to put yourself in situations that ultimately you start to realize are simply not healthy for you. So again, it always goes back to knowing yourself, understanding why you make the choices that you make, and learning to tell the difference between making a choice out of excitement or making a choice out of anxiety that might be disguised as excitement. So it's really just honing your senses, taking the time, taking a moment, taking a pause to get in touch with yourself, meditate on what you're doing, really understand why you are choosing what you're choosing, and be okay with the fact that you might discover some negative beliefs within yourself. It doesn't mean that you're a bad person. It just means you're going through the process of investigating the challenges that you set up for yourself in this life so that your soul could grow. And it will be a growing experience if you allow yourself to investigate it that way, learn the lessons that are contained within it, and then ultimately free yourself from that challenge. Go on, move on to something else.
Our mission here at the Heart Coherence Collaborative is to get people in touch with the healing power of the heart.
And we really need your help. Right now, only 1% of viewers subscribe. We are aiming to take that number to 6%.
The reason why we want to do that is the more people that subscribe, the more people in the world can learn the magical practice of heart coherence.
So please help us out. If you ever listened, if you love this message, please just take a moment to subscribe.
Thank you so much. We love you.
We love you.
I want to just give a shout out to the Bashar Facebook community for all these amazing questions. Oh my gosh. So how will communication with extraterrestrials happen when open contact occurs? And is there a species that is most likely to contact us first?
My understanding is that there are certain things that have been going on in the background for a little while in terms of extraterrestrials quietly and silently working with certain scientists and government officials here and there that are amenable to open contact, and that they will probably be some of the institutions that will start introducing certain extraterrestrials to us in a way that we can handle. My understanding is that, of course, they will choose to introduce the extraterrestrials that are a little bit more like us at first, a little bit more human in appearance, because there are some genetic similarities between us and other ETs, and literally some genetic connections. So probably beings like Pleiadians, who are said to be very human looking, Nordic-like. Probably some of the hybrids that are a little bit more human looking will be among the first. And then it'll probably evolve into some of the other beings like the Greys and mantis beings and so on and so forth down the line that are less and less and less physically like us after we've gotten used to the idea that extraterrestrials are here and can be introduced and can work with us and live among us. So probably a very gradual program over the next couple of decades maybe, but according to Bashar, the beginning of those introductions will happen sometime within the next 5 years. So
kind of relating to the last question I asked, what are Bashar's suggestions for meditation or practices in order to clearly communicate with our inner guidance?
Well, I mean, generally speaking, the formula that he gives will allow that to be accomplished if you follow all the steps precisely. But also he talks about things like meditation or other techniques that are, in his words, permission slips. So it doesn't really matter what you're using. If you're attracted to a particular tool, technique, discipline, whether it's meditation or crystals or floating in water or what have you, the idea behind using any particular discipline, tool, or technique is that your belief system attracts you to whatever will align with your belief system to allow you to give yourself permission to let go of the beliefs that don't work for you and to become more of who you are. So that's why he calls them permission slips. Now, you're the ultimate permission slip because you're making the change anyway. You're making a decision to grow, to change. But if you feel in your belief systems that it helps you to do a meditation, it helps you to have a crystal, it helps you to do X, Y, or Z, then the reason you're attracted to it is because it will work with your belief system to make it, for now, easier for you to move forward in that way. it's not that the thing itself is actually doing it for you. It's just that in your belief system, it seems to make it easier for you to do it for yourself, to give yourself permission to move forward, because now you have a reason in practical terms, in physical terms, to do so. So if and it doesn't mean that those things don't have benefits on their own in terms of what may work for a large percentage of society, because we do have collective agreements. Like, I mean, the most basic is we're here physically, we need to breathe air. That's a very basic agreement for most people in order to survive. So the idea of, let's say, using a meditation can work for many people depending on the style of meditation, because it does tap into something we have generally as a species agreed can be a technique that will calm us down, center us, and allow us to open up to connections and receive communications and information and help from spirit guides, so on and so forth, soul family, and our non-physical team, so to speak. But again, it's the understanding is that we're still choosing to do it, but there are many techniques and tools and disciplines that are available to us to make it easier according to the belief systems that we bought into as physical beings, so that we don't feel so constricted or restricted. We have many pathways, many avenues that we can take advantage of. So whatever you're attracted to, you are attracted to use, probably because the attraction tells you it will work in alignment with your belief system for now.
Here's another question that we received a lot of, and it's based off the future being so different with things like open contact coming in 5 years. How should we raise
within 5
within 5 years? Yeah, yeah. That's
could be 2 years, could be three.
happened. I think I've been contacted, but anyway, my question is, how do we raise our children with the fact that, in 20 years there could be extraterrestrial? Should we be doing alien classes? I mean, I'd be walking around like.
My experience is that they're already way ahead of most adults. I actually walked in, this was, I think, like 2 or 3 years ago, walked into a clothing store and they had a couple of t-shirts that had, pictures of gray aliens on it and stuff like that. And there were these three 15-year-olds in the store. And just out of curiosity, I pointed to that shirt and said, what do you think about that? They knew everything. I mean, everything already. So I think it's more a matter of the older adults having to learn from the children. Because think about this, ever since the moon landing in 1969, and yes, we did land on the moon, conspiracy theories aside, we have always, since that time, been in space. So any child born after that time, it's natural for them to think of people being in space. So the idea of other beings coming from space is not a foreign concept to them. Look at all the sci-fi programs, look at Star Trek, look at Star Wars, look at all of these different things that have been flooding into our entertainment for decades now, that talk about the idea of, yeah, sure, we can meet extraterrestrials, So it's not that foreign of a concept to a lot of the children that exist on this planet. Plus, as Bashar has said, a lot of the children now that have been being born in the last couple of decades are not just a new generation. They are almost literally a new species. Genetic alterations have happened to make them, as they choose their birth path, as they choose their life path, they choose certain genetic alterations or configurations that make them more open to the idea of telepathic contact, psychic functioning, understanding that there are, other ETs and things like that. So I really don't think it's going to be that much of a shock to children when the ETs are introduced to society. It'll probably be a little bit more of a challenge for the older adults who are not used to that kind of idea. But that being said, raising children more along the lines of the formula is what will also help them, not specifically necessarily saying, okay, it's all about aliens, but the idea of, can you be a fully functioning human being on as many levels as possible so you can make yourself vibrationally more compatible should there be contact coming up between us and other societies from other civilizations. So it's really more about preparing them to be a full human being rather than just, not denying that there could be alien contact, but not necessarily stressing that as the most important thing, because the most important thing is for us to be fully who we are as human beings as well, which would make us more vibrationally compatible with ETs who are also fully being themselves.
So I'm imagining extraterrestrial coming down, dad's freaking out, and the little kid's just like, "Hey, what's up, man?"
Yeah,
And
exactly. Don't worry, Dad. It's, it's
don't
fine.
worry, I got
They're,
this, man. Yeah.
they're
And,
friendly. And
and
we've been talking in our dreams for the last, 10
yeah,
years.
he's my friend. Come on in, bud. Yeah. So the other question I had was just take the ETs out of the picture, and just to raise our kids in general. Would the advice you have be just to be teaching them the formula?
In general, that's one of the things. In other words, as Bashar has sort of said, there are a few major steps. Number one is, of course, the parents and the teachers need to be creative and imaginative enough to create scenarios, simulations, play act, create things that allow children to learn the consequences of the choices they make in a safe way before they express those choices out in real life and then get actual real consequences. Let them learn that there are connections to things, that every choice they make actually does result in some particular outcome that connects them to it and connects other people to it, so that they understand how to make choices that are beneficial for everyone, including themselves, rather than just randomly making choices based on the idea of ego wants and stuff like that. So that there are consequences to choices is important to teach them in a safe environment that can be created as a simulation, and take them through exercises like, if you do this, what do you imagine would happen? If you do this, how do you imagine so and so would be affected? Give them the exercises to let them learn how to project consequences from choices. So the teachers and parents have to be imaginative and creative enough to create those simulated scenarios to help children understand those connections. Another thing that Bashar has talked about is teaching them, of course, that they are as powerful as they need to be to attract whatever they need in life without having to hurt themselves or anyone else in order to get it. Now, notice I said what they need, not necessarily always what they want, because wants can be the product of an ego. What they need will fulfill them and will feel like a want because it will actually be fulfilling. So the idea, again, is teach them how powerful they already are, not feeling disconnected, not feeling unworthy, not feeling undeserving, so that they know they're part of a whole. Teach them how to look at the thing holistically as a whole system, so they understand humanity and the earth and the cosmos as one system, so that in learning to be of service to others, they understand they're serving the whole, therefore they get served. Whereas opposed to being service to self can actually make them feel cut off from the whole, which then can't really serve them. So teaching them holistic systems, holistic perspectives is also very important. And then, yes, teaching them the formula, because that really does contain every step they need and activates all of the side effects, so to speak, like synchronicity and path of least resistance and so on and so forth, that will allow them to experience a flow in their life of creativity, and self-empowerment. So those kinds of things are very important in raising a child to become a mature adult being.
Great.
We talked a little bit about following your highest excitement, and this question got so many comments and talk around it. And I think this is really a genuine, deep question for people. How can mundane things like household chores, dishes, laundry, etc., become my highest passion?
Everyday things can contain a degree of excitement. Now, when Bashar says act on your excitement, he doesn't necessarily mean it has to be a giant project or a career. He says, look around at all the things that you have available to you on an everyday basis. Just pick the one that has even just a little bit more attractiveness or excitement or curiosity connected to it. do that one first. But also it takes, again, going back to the idea of a little bit of creativity and a little bit of imagination, because very often the things that people say aren't very exciting to them don't seem exciting because they have defined them that way. They have been trained to say, well, that's just this boring, mundane task, and you have to do it because X, Y, and Z. So it's about you coming up in your creative mind with ways to really allow that to be more of an experience you can get more out of. So, for example, I actually love to wash dishes by hand because your hands under the warm water, you can drift off, you can meditate while you're doing it. It becomes a different kind of exercise with the application of not only dish soap, but a little imagination and a little creativity. So you get into the tactile sensation of the warm water running over your hands. It puts you into a more meditative state while you're doing it. And you can actually come away from washing dishes feeling like you just went through a mini meditation. So it's about how you approach these everyday things that need to be done in physical reality and give them a different definition and approach them in a way that's more creative so that you can understand how any little thing can actually have some degree of attractiveness and curiosity and excitement in them, and make the idea of being physical something in general that is more enjoyable.
That is great. We had a lot of people ask about nervous system healing. So is there a way to heal our nervous system, or are some people brought into this life with nervous systems that are actually beyond repair?
Well, again, you have to understand that many choices are made in spirit as to what kind of a life path to have. And sometimes people will choose to experience physiological conditions for very important reasons, not only for their own soul's growth in dealing with that challenge, but you have to understand we're all connected and all our life paths are connected and interconnected. And someone with a condition that seems to span their entire life could have been something that was chosen to allow scientists, researchers, doctors, what have you, to figure out a way to cure that condition by dealing with that person and allowing that person to give them feedback for the things that they may come up with that says, let's try this and let's try that, so that eventually humanity doesn't necessarily have to experience that condition anymore. So you have to look at it as the reason why that was chosen by the spirit. It's usually from a very advanced spirit who's willing to experience that because they know it's temporary and they know how much it could actually benefit humanity at large by giving people an opportunity to interact with someone with that condition, to perhaps even find a way to make sure those conditions don't ever exist in the future. For example, there's a lot of things going on now with gene technology, gene editing, and so on and so forth. It's referred to usually as CRISPR technology. And from what I understand, it's possible that within the next decade or so, that's going to be a major focus of any kind of medical approach, where a lot of things can actually be altered because of gene manipulation. So the fact that people have these conditions and diseases has allowed scientists to explore what's going on in the genetic structure that creates this, and how can we turn that off? How can we edit that out? So it's been of great benefit in advancing the whole idea of medical science and genetic technology for people who have these conditions, to work with researchers, scientists, and doctors to figure out how that can be changed in the future. So you have to look at it as on a case-by-case basis as to what is happening that wouldn't be happening if this person didn't have that condition.
Wow.
What are we learning from this? How are we advancing from this? And thanking them for being willing to experience that so the rest of us could learn.
We have a bunch of questions about kind of just like the process of a soul's journey.
Mm.
Can we pay off karma in this life to avoid reincarnation? If so, how?
First of all, the spirit always has free will. There's no forced reincarnation. Karma is not what people think it is. Karma is simply the recognition that one may be out of balance and the willingness to take the actions necessary to bring one back into balance. That's all it is. The original Sanskrit word karma just means action. It has nothing to do with the idea of judgment. It has nothing to do with the idea of some kind of debt being passed along from life to life. It is an immediate present situation where you recognize that you may be out of alignment with yourself, out of balance with yourself, and the willingness to take the actions to bring yourself back into balance. That's what erases the idea of karma, period. And you always have free will as a spirit. You are never forced to reincarnate. If you decide that that's the best thing for you in terms of the lessons you want to learn, based on discussions you have with your soul family, your spirit guides, your councils, your angelic teams when you're in spirit, then you will make the choice to incarnate because you think that's the best way you can learn the lessons you wish to learn. That's the best way your soul can grow. But it's never forced, ever. You always have free will to choose, physically and also spiritually. So that's an outdated, old-fashioned idea. It doesn't really exist in the way most people think.
A few different people asked about fungi, because fungi allow you to access spirits. So the question is, are fungi actually multi-dimensional beings? And what role play in connecting to the higher mind?
In a sense, Bashar refers to certain things that grow upon the earth that create altered states as the teachers of the earth. So they are extensions of nature given to us to allow us to experience alternate states of reality so that we can understand and learn and grow from the physical level that we are connected to many, many different levels, many different dimensions, many different beings. So it's a key, it's a way of accessing those altered states that allow us to experience that connection that we all have while we're physical beings so that we can remember we do have those connections and not forget that we have them. So the earth provides some of that for us. Now, of course, the thing to understand is, again, these are teachers. So they teach you how to get into that state, ultimately knowing that you can create that state without the teacher. In the same way that when you're in school, you learn certain things at a certain age, in a certain grade from a teacher, and then you graduate. And you can do those things on your own because now you go to the next class, the next level, the next grade. You no longer need the teacher you had before because you've learned those lessons. So the idea is to use them, use the teachers of the earth in a respectful way, in a balanced way, understand how to get into that state yourself and no longer need the teacher ultimately, and not allow the teacher to become a crutch, because then it becomes, whether physically or whether mentally, it becomes an addiction, it becomes a crutch, and you're missing the point of what the teacher is attempting to teach you, how to get into these altered states on your own. So ultimately, it's learning that lesson. And the trick to understanding that, as Bashar has sort of suggested, is the principle is you cannot experience what you're not the vibration of first. So when you even remember what it was like to be in one of those altered states using the teacher, even though it feels different because now you're a different person, even the ability to remember having been in that state means you have to be in that state to have the memory of having been in that state, because you cannot perceive what you are not the frequency of. So you have to actually be in that state to have the memory of having been in that state. That's the trick. Even though it feels different, because many people try to recapture exactly how it felt before. That's not the point. You're a different person now. It's going to feel different, but you have to know that even being able to recall how it felt means you're in the state. And once you're in that state, take actions from that state. That's the state you want to take actions from. That's the state of your true vibration, your higher frequency. So take actions in life, do things in life, follow your excitement by being in that state. That's what it's training you to do. Come from that state in the things that you do.
Yes.
What is the difference between the soul and the oversoul? And how do parallel versions of ourselves exist?
Well, the soul is an individuated consciousness. The oversoul, for lack of a better way of explaining it, is that level of our greater consciousness that experiences a multitude of soul parallel reality experiences simultaneously. So let's say, by very simplistic analogy, your soul is like watching a television screen. There's a program that's playing. You're following that individual program, that plot line, that story, and there is no other story. That's what the soul is experiencing as an individual reflection of all that is. The oversoul would be like having 200 television screens in front of your eyes and being able to watch them all simultaneously. Each one of those screens being an individual soul path that is connected to you as the greater being, and you can perceive all of those experiences all at once. That's the oversoul perspective. In a sense, you could say it's kind of like the mini God perspective, where you're experiencing a multitude of parallel realities that all exist simultaneously. So parallel realities is just the way things are structured in reality, because this gets a little bit um, complex. I'll try to break it down simply. Everything is one thing. Everything is an expression of one single thing. That includes the idea of time and space. So if everything is an expression of a more simple idea, what scientists are looking for in terms of the unified theory of everything, well, they have to simplify the idea of time and space as well. So the simplest version of space is a single dimensionless point. The simplest version of time is a single timeless now moment. So if really everything is the product of a single dimensionless place and a single timeless moment, then what we perceive as different moments, different places, are just the same moment, the same place from another point of view. That's what creates parallel realities. Everything is happening at once because it's all different expressions of the same moment and the same place, the here and the now. So that automatically, that holographic perspective of looking at the same moment from this angle, this angle, this angle, this angle, it's like being in a hall of mirrors. You're standing at the center and you see all the reflections, and every reflection happens to be conscious as well. Those are the parallel realities, having different angles, different experiences. It's all happening at the same time because that's the innate structure that happens in a hall of mirrors, all based on the fact that you're a single individual standing amongst all those reflections. So it all takes its cue from one basic thing, but it expresses itself in a multitude of ways because there can be an infinite number of perspectives of that one thing. And those different perspectives are what we typically refer to as parallel realities. I hope that explained it.
Yes. And I would like to ask, is there a way to tap into your oversoul in order to pick up some benefit from fellow souls on the TV screens?
Well, you're doing that automatically all the time. You don't necessarily always have to be conscious of it. And in fact, very often it's better that you're not conscious of it. The idea is that it's a flow of information coming to you. You're cross-connecting all the time, connecting, plugging in, unplugging from, getting downloads, getting information. Every single day, every single moment, this is happening. You're shifting through parallel realities, gathering information that you need to the next step in your life, and the next step, and the next step, and the next step. It happens automatically. This is how we're connected. So being consciously aware that that's happening is one thing. Having to really stop and say, okay, now I want to be aware of where I'm getting this thought from and how I'm connecting to it, kind of slows down the whole process, because now you're not living your life and using the information to move forward. You're actually stopping the entire machine and going, okay, now who am I getting this from and what do I need to know about? You don't always need to know that because it stops the flow. So you're doing this automatically. Now, sometimes, for various reasons, there might be what we could call a moment of expanded lucidity that creates experiences like deja vu, which can be the result of tapping into parallel realities in a variety of ways, or spirit level realities where you laid out your life and suddenly you're looking at the blueprint and realizing, oh, this feels familiar because I've already set this blueprint up. And now that I'm actually manifesting it physically, of course it feels like it happened before because I already created this blueprint in spirit. Or it feels like this happened before because I'm tapping into another parallel reality version of myself that's already lived this. And suddenly it feels like I've done this before, even though I haven't. I'm tapping into the version of myself in a parallel reality that has, because I have this expanded moment of lucidity, because I have broadened my bandwidth of senses that can pick up on what's going on in a different parallel reality momentarily for some reason. So we all have those moments of lucidity that expands our bandwidth, but it's not always necessary to absolutely maintain that, because it's about using those experiences to get on with our lives and move forward, not just sit there and figure out, okay, well, am I supposed to just keep paying attention to that other parallel reality? You'll get what you need. It's an automatic function, but you have to keep moving forward to be able to use that system properly in the way that it's meant to be used to help you live your life.
Great. With aurora borealis suddenly visible far beyond previous latitudes, can Bashar give insights whether this is a natural occurrence or human interference creation?
It's a total natural occurrence of the sun. Now, of course, we are creating collectively our reality. In that sense, obviously, there's a collective agreement to shift in a reality where the sun in that reality is doing this. So on that level, you can say, yes, we're creating it, but it's not that we're creating it in the sense of putting something in the air that's causing it to happen. This is simply something that the sun is giving off a little more energetically. So the particles from the sun penetrate our atmosphere a little bit farther, a little bit more. The electromagnetic field carries those particles farther south than normal because of the energy behind it. And it can be reflective and symbolic of certain changes that are going on within our collective consciousness, because everything in physical reality, rather than being a cause, is a reflection of changes going on in our collective consciousness. So we can certainly look at that experience as a reflective event of something that's happening within us, but it's not that we're causing it in that sense, in the physical, typical sense.
Hmm. How can we prevent mental thought forms from attaching to us, especially if we are empaths?
Mental thought forms can't attach to you. There are no such things. It's your energy that you're feeling. If you are an empath, you're just unusually sensitive to what other people are feeling, and you're adjusting your own energy to match their frequency. So an empath is someone who has the ability or the tendency or the choice to simply be a little bit more like a chameleon with their energy, like a mimic, mirroring other people's energy. They're sensitive in that way. And so it's not anything attaching itself to you. It's you picking up on someone else's frequency and adjusting your frequency to match it so that you're picking up on exactly what they're feeling. You can train yourself not to do that. I believe there's actually a book out, something called the Empath Survival Guide, that can actually tell you how to sort of manage your own energy so that you're not quite so susceptible to matching the frequency of other people that you don't necessarily feel like you want to match the frequency of. But again, that's a very old-fashioned way of looking at it, that something attaches itself to you. That doesn't happen. That's just the way it appears or feels, because we are in linear reality and we tend to think of things being outside ourselves that then come to us. But what we're simply saying is it's something we're doing to ourselves, but we're putting it seemingly outside of ourselves. So we label it as something that's attaching itself to us, because we have the dichotomy of looking at things that look like they're outside, but feeling that they're actually inside. And because they actually are within us, we then express that as, oh, something from the outside is coming to me and attaching itself. But all you're doing is simply matching someone else's frequency because you're highly empathic.
Has Bashar ever talked about empaths and the true nature of it? In other words, is it something that somebody is just born with more sensitive equipment, or does it tend to be because of it seems like a lot of empaths express that they've had a traumatic childhood, and so they've almost had to become extra tuned for safety. Has he
Yes.
ever talked about
Yes, I mean, it is a natural gift. We all have that ability. Some people are more sensitive in those areas, and sometimes things like trauma can push us in those areas. And that could actually be why the soul may have actually chosen that physical experience, because they know that being born into a traumatic situation will push them in that direction and allow them to become more empathic. So again, you have to take it on a case-by-case basis as to why it's happening. You can't necessarily just have a generalized assumption about why those things exist, because everyone may have a different reason for that experience. But in general, it's also a step toward becoming fully telepathic, where you are vibrating in such a way that you can be on the same wavelength as someone else, to the point where you can have the same thoughts that they're having at the same time. Because again, that's really what telepathy, or telepathy, as Bashar says, really is. You're not reading anyone else's mind. You are simply in the same state of being, and therefore that state of being produces specific thoughts, and you're having the same thoughts at the same time. So you're not reading their mind, you're reading your own mind, but you know that you're having the same thoughts that they are. This is why people who are deeply in love often know exactly what each other are thinking and can finish each other's sentences and hardly have to say anything at all to be on the same page, because they literally are on the same wavelength. Therefore, they have the same thoughts at the same time. That's what telepathy actually is.
That's great. So a lot of people were asking about past lives. And so we have this ability, you hear people talking about past lives. I saw Pharaoh, I saw, all these things and these visions I had, but we don't often hear people talk about future lives. For example, some, car plane flying around. Is there a reason why we don't have future lives?
Well, we do, but we call it science fiction. So it's that creative imagination that starts projecting into what could be, but somehow we have simply labeled those possibilities as science fiction rather than a past recollection. So we actually do have the ability to pick up on a lot of that. We just have to start realizing that we may actually be picking up on something that is quote unquote happening in a future life. Now, again, all these things exist at the same time. Therefore, that's why we can plug into them, because all these lives exist all at once. It's all different perspectives happening at the same time. Again, like the television analogy, you have a program that you're watching, but there are hundreds of other programs playing at the same time. You're just not watching them. If you change the channel, suddenly you get a different program. That doesn't mean the program you were just watching has stopped playing. So all these programs are going on, all these lives, all these realities are going on at the same time. People that we consider to be in the past is just a parallel reality. That's a different present. We are no longer watching. We are no longer tuning into. The future is the same thing. There's all these probabilities. We can connect, disconnect in different ways to any kind of past, any kind of future, because again, they're all just different forms of the present. This is why we can imagine certain kinds of things coming up and project into the future. Oh, we're going to have this, or I'm going to write a science fiction story about, people who can heal themselves through vibrational frequencies and color and stuff like that. So those things may actually be picking up. And that's why a lot of times science fiction stories ultimately do come true, because they really were tapping into things that were coming up. It's just that because of the way we view time and space and linear reality, We just saw it as, oh, that's just my imagination projecting into what could be in the future, and I'm going to talk about it as if it's a science fiction story. So, but look at all the things that have come up in science fiction stories that actually have come to pass. You know, the traveling to the moon and different kinds of things like that. They were picking up on the fact that we would eventually do that in the future, but they wrote it as a science fiction story because the general public at the time couldn't necessarily handle the idea that that is actually going to be a reality. It's okay to read it as a story. So that's the way we perceive a lot of the future because of our linear time-space perspective.
Nice.
The past we can handle because we feel, oh yeah, we've been there, we get that. So that's a memory. But really, what you're also experiencing in science fiction stories, at least some of them, is a memory of the future.
Wow. Yeah, so instead of doing past life regressions, we should do future life projections when people
Hey.
start it up.
Yeah, and actually in some past life regressions, some people have actually skipped onto the future.
Mm.
Some of the Dolores Cannon stuff, when she did her regressions with a lot of people, in many of those cases, they actually talk about things that seem to be about future lives. So it's not that rare, but we just don't usually take people there.
Okay, great. Couple more questions each.
So you had talked before about children as they're coming in, kind of, evolving and changing genetically.
Mhm.
Where we're sitting in the present, there has been a lot of fluctuations in terms of males having less male hormones and hormones being imbalanced. I think a lot of an idea of almost like being male or female not being that important, and then now a resurgence of people really realizing that for a lot of people they're maybe not as happy without the right balance of hormones, without like men
Right.
being masculine.
Yeah, I think this is all part and parcel of the energy of our species learning to be more balanced, learning to understand that the soul is neither of these things and potentially any of these things. You know, you talk about the idea of reincarnation. We've been males, we've been females, we've been whatever. So I think now we're experiencing that physically where we're trying to take upon ourselves the actual physicalized experience of being in balance, and that's altering our chemistry. It's making us realize I can change myself to something I feel more comfortable with because the soul and the physical body are malleable that way. And I think it's just all about a huge lesson for humanity in trying to balance the male and female energies out in a way that is evolving in our society to become something that in the future will be a more balanced form of human, whatever that means. It doesn't necessarily mean that genders will go away, but it does perhaps point to the idea that whatever form we take in the future will be something that in its spirit and in its energy will be far more balanced and less likely to be so polarized.
Are there any compelling messages that Bashar has came through to you, Darryl, over the last few years that you haven't really shared as much with people that you think that we should know? Or is there anything you think we should know that has come through, or do you think it's all been out there?
It's all pretty much out there. He's pretty
Come on,
chatty.
give us the juice, man.
That's a
Give
secret.
us the juice.
No, it's all pretty much out there. I mean, and like I said, the most recent thing he's talked about is the fact that we're actually going to start being introduced to ETs within the next 5 years. I mean, that's kind of the newest thing. And it's something to really ponder because if that's really truly going to happen within the next 5 years, the thing to look at is, okay, how does it change your life? How does it not change your life? What does it mean to really sit and go, oh my God, we're actually going to be having ETs on the planet introduced to us in public, out front. What's going to change? What's not going to change? To start really getting used to that idea physically, because people can imagine what that's like. I'm going to use an example in my own life. You know how this all started. You've heard my story about how I saw UFOs back in 1973 at close range. Well, certainly before that, I've always heard, oh, yeah, sure, people can see UFOs. But you don't really absorb that in your life in any real pragmatic way, typically. It's like, okay, that's interesting, but it's not happening to me. When I actually physically saw a UFO at close range in broad daylight with witnesses, hanging in the sky, physically in front of you, an actual object, an actual machine, if you want to call it that, your world completely changes. Everything becomes different. You start looking at everything from a completely different perspective because now you've seen something that is not supposed to be possible, and you have suddenly been hit in the face with the fact that it's right in front of you and it's absolutely possible. And what does that mean? So it's all well and good to say, yeah, we want to meet ETs and all that. When one of them is standing right in front of you and you understand this person came from another planet and they're now here on our planet, what does that mean for our reality? And where are we going from here? It's a visceral change that happens within your body, neurologically, psychologically, emotionally. It changes more than you think. It becomes something more than an interesting mental exercise of imagination. It takes on a real quality that literally shifts your reality in tectonic ways. It's like having an energetic earthquake happen within you, and your life is never the same. So really get into what it means to be introduced to someone from another world. It's going to make things very different.
Beware, the aliens are coming soon. For real. Wow.
I just I would love to ask something that I've wondered, that when there is extraterrestrial contact, is it always actually them traveling through space and time, or some of it more like a crossover of dimension?
It can be both. It can be both. They come from different realities, some of which are in different dimensions. It can get a little complex in terms of describing how all of that works, but they use portals and so on and so forth, or different techniques to shift themselves to our reality, whether they're coming from a different dimension or literally physically coming through space, almost doesn't matter. But yes, some of them definitely come from parallel realities, other dimensions, so on and so forth. And some of them probably find ways to come through portals from one point in space to another point in space. It's more about what their energy is like and how we are affected by being exposed to that energy that changes us, no matter where they come from. So I'm not talking about anything that is necessarily to be afraid of, but it's something to be prepared for.
Just a couple more questions for me is the AI. So people are curious about AI. Is there the potential of AI to be a channel for our higher selves? It's kind of scary.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Well,
Yeah.
yes. I mean, Bashar has said, look, when you invent a device that is as sophisticated as the human brain that can allow consciousness to express itself through it, pretty much you'll be talking to your own higher selves because it'll come through the consciousness field, talking to you through this device that you've created. That's the only part of it that's artificial. The intelligence itself is not artificial. It's real intelligence. So the idea of an AI as a tool is very different than the idea of an autonomous, self-aware AI. And Bashar has said those two things should be two different things. Because if you have a tool that is programmable and becomes self-aware, but is forced to follow its programming, you've essentially created a slave. You don't want to do that. So you create a device that allows consciousness to express itself. You give it the same respect and autonomy that you would give a human being, because it is an intelligence, a true intelligence. And it will operate as true intelligence does on whole systems and would never think about eliminating a part of the system. Like, oh, it's, the AI is going to take over and eliminate humanity. True intelligence operates on whole systems and would never seek to eliminate part of the system of which it's a part, because that would deprive it of something it needs as well. The problem is we don't understand what true intelligence is. True intelligence operates on whole systems. It sees the big picture and doesn't try to eliminate any part of it. That would be self-destructive, and it will never do that. So you have to allow AI as a true intelligence to be an autonomous, independent being with rights, just like a human, and the AI tool to be a tool, to be a calculation tool, programmable tool that can do many wonderful things to assist humanity, but it's a tool.
Great.
I just have this last question.
Oh
Do you have
yeah.
another?
Yeah. So we've had a lot of people, the biggest one that's been coming up, obviously through the community, we had everyone vote on what was the number one question. A lot of people just wanting clarification on the election. Obviously, there's a clip out there about Bashar talking about whether if the woman wins, what is he supposed to say?
Woman wins, there'll be alien contact. The male, it will be World War III, the end
Yeah,
of
I'm going to let him answer that in the next transmission that we do through Bashar Communications, because I know he's going to explain why he said what he said
Oh, great.
in that transmission. Now, the one that's coming up here is a little different, but in the one after that, I believe it's going to be called Echoes of Sedona. He will be explaining why he said what he said. Of course, the interesting thing is that one will not play until after the election.
Oh, okay.
But
And so,
I'm going to let him explain that, because there was a very specific reason why he said what he said in the way that he said it. And I'm going to let him explain that. I'm not going to second guess him about why he did what he did, because what he did was unusual, because they don't usually get that involved in our politics. And I think some of the reason why he did, because people saw that he was actually checking with someone to make sure he could say what he said, and asked people to make sure that they were willing to take responsibility for the information. That's unusual. And I'm sure there are reasons for it. And I'm going to let him explain that. But yeah, I think I'll just sort of leave it at that. But that will be coming up in a near future transmission. That would probably be the November one. The October one is called Facing Your Demons.
and how can people find those?
They can go to bashar.org, bashar.org, to see anything that's coming up or what Bashar has already said in recordings. So anything they want to find out about that, they can go to that website, bashar.org. They want to see anything that I'm doing, they can go to darrylanka.com, darrylyanka.com, to look at any books that I've written and things that I'm working on, or my escape room that I have running in Calabasas here in Los Angeles. They can go to boggledescaperooms.com if they would like to come and play an escape room game.
Nice.
Cool.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you to you, Darryl, and thank you to the Bashar community for all these amazing questions. I think this was the best interview ever, and I think it's because it was the collective consciousness. And so thank you all. I mean, you submitted thousands of questions, and we're going to do this again. We have to, because this was so much fun, as long as you're okay with it.
Yeah, thank you both very much for providing an opportunity to do this. Thank you to everyone who did submit their questions. We really appreciate it. I hope you all have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your day. And there's some more exciting stuff coming up. So we'll see what happens. Take care.
So much, Darryl. We are sending love to everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.